So is everybody, now I have the difficult task of keeping everyone awake right after they ate food and such. But this potentially could be the most important talk that you see because everybody runs into problems, and this is a way to find your way out of those problems. But before I get further, we're going to pass around this sheet for you to put your name if you want to, and something that you'd like us to cover. We're trying to take requests, particularly on the third day, to cover something from your data set. Well, not specifically your data set, but some aspect of YT that you're confused about, that you've run into problems with in the past, or something that you'd just like us to address in some way. So I'm just going to start this. It'll go across the room and then cycle back on that side, and we'll collect it at the end. So here's for you, Britton. What would you like to learn? All right, so as I was saying, this lecture, the Zen lecture of finding your way, everybody runs into problems. Those problems could be as varied as problems with your own script and something that you're doing wrong, something that YT is broken, something that's wrong in Python or Matplotlib. I mean, YT rests on a lot of different layers, and you might misinterpret something or whatnot. So this is a way to get back on track and figure out what's going on. So there's a long laundry list here that we're going to cover each item here, so you don't have to write this down or whatnot. But basically, the first thing that you should do, is at the top here, there's a link, which is basically this list. Although not as detailed. I'm going to update the list on the web, but you can always go there. It's linked as how to get help on the YT docs webpage. But the first thing is, well, okay, before I get to that, there are 10 steps. Most of these steps are things that you can do on your own before you have to jump and start asking other people for help. Now, this isn't necessarily meant to be an in-order laundry list or algorithm. It can be, but the nature of your problems is going to dictate which steps you take and which ones you don't. So the first thing is, don't panic and don't give up. Stealing from Douglas Adams a bit here, although I forgot the towel, as Stephen pointed out. Don't panic, because the problems that you're encountering are almost positively problems that other people have suffered from in the past. So don't worry about it. We'll get through your problems together. The next thing, and this is something that I find oftentimes fixes the question, or the problem that I'm encountering. You can just update your version of YT very easily by running YT update at the command line. It'll contact the Mercurial server. It will pull any of the new updates to the Mercurial server, and then it will rebuild your installation. So oftentimes this can fix things. So if you have a problem, you can't figure out what's going on, update it just to make sure. And it doesn't take long at all either. Alternatively, you can do a full reinstall, which takes a little bit longer, but not really that much longer, because when you rerun the install script, it doesn't try to re-download packages like Python or Python if you already have them present. It'll just get newer versions if there's a new version for which you can use. So these are both really good ways to start out addressing your issues. Okay, so what else is there? Something that Britton brought up a couple of times are a couple of really handy commands in Python. So these are just Python helpers. There's the help function, there's the directory function, and then there's this keys function which hangs off of different objects. It hangs off of dictionary objects. And for those of you who don't know what a dictionary is, it's essentially a table that links a key to an entry associated with that key. And it turns out that in YT we use keys and dictionaries very, very frequently. So it can oftentimes be very useful. So what's best to do here, of course, is to not just yap about this stuff, but it is good to actually demonstrate it. So what I'd like to do, okay, here we go. So for instance, I'm not going to show that right now. I'll just load up Python, and I'm going to import yt.mods. Fair enough. Something everybody's probably familiar with. It's very similar to the from yt.mods import star command. And now that I have this ytmods module that's loaded into memory, I want to find out what's going on with this. So I do help yt.mods. Help gives me the documentation that's in the source code that's affiliated with yt.mods, or whatever object or function that you want to learn more about. So you can space through this and get function lists. You can get whatever information is in the documentation in the doc strings to learn more about what's available for that object or function or whatnot. Furthermore, you can do dir, i.e. directory, on that same thing and get a listing of, oh goodness, there's a lot of things. These are all the functions or attributes that are associated with yt.mods. It sometimes can be really overwhelming like this, so you may not, at least it's alphabetical, so you can sort through it if you need to. And then, as I was saying, we can use this .keys function. So unfortunately, yt.mods is not a dictionary, but we can load up a parameter file. So I'm just going to do pf equals yt.mods.load. And I just happen to have in this directory this data dump, this file of dd0000. OK, so it loaded it. And now let's do help on that, on pf, on our parameter file. OK, so it tells us it's a flash static output. And it tells us some of the functions that are associated with that. So it's very useful. You can run directory on that, and you can see the different functions and attributes associated with it. And finally, we can run keys on that, and it tells us the different dictionary entries associated with that. So now you know a little bit more. Oh, that's weird. You know a little bit more how to a little bit more about this particular object. So this can be really, really useful in dealing with data types or attributes or whatnot that you're unfamiliar with. And please feel free, particularly because this is a helping lecture or talk, to ask questions throughout this, because this is all about trying to address how to make it so you don't get lost when you're trying to code or use YT, or Python for that matter. OK, so Python, as many of you know, has its interactive version called IPython, and thus YT also has an interactive version called IYT. Some of the benefits of this are that you get automatic tab completion on different attributes associated with different objects, in the same way that at the Unix command line, with most nice shells, you'll get tab completion of things. So that can be really, really useful if you don't know what attributes are associated with something. And if for whatever reason you're running IPython on a script or IYT on a script and it fails, it drops you into a live environment. So you can look at the status of various variables at the time that it failed, which is super useful, instead of kicking you out of Python and then you're left scratching your head trying to figure out what the heck happened. And furthermore, you have these two question mark kind of functions that can be used in this environment, which will bring up, this is the single question mark is the equivalent of running help on a function or a module, and double question mark actually brings up the source for it, which is super useful. So let's demonstrate that. I'll just load up IPython. No, I'll do, yeah. IPython from yt.mods import star. And again, I'm going to load up that small data parameter file. And now I have pf, so I want to do pf question mark. Well, question mark brings up, oh, it tells me a little bit about what's going on. Oh, this is a flash static output. Oh, OK, that's pretty useful. And if I do pf question mark, it's not very well formatted for this color rendering, but this is actually the source associated with it. So you can't really read it, but potentially if you have a better color mapping than I do, you'd be able to read the source. But I'm going to show you another way to look at the source anyway. So, are there any questions on that? Am I going too quick? What's up, Molly? You do, and PF was the actual. Yeah, I need to be. Oh yeah, you need, in order to do the question mark and the double question mark, you need to be inside of IPython or IYT. That's the only key. What's that? No, but I'm going to show you something that's going to allow you to do some of the things associated with IPython from Python using the Python debugger. Okay. All right. So you can also use the Python debugger depending on the nature of your problem. And I know there's a lot of text here, but the really important part is the stuff in red. You import this module called PDB, the Python debugger, and then you can do things. I mean, the only thing I've ever done with the Python debugger is set trace points, which is just to say pdb.set_trace. And what that does, if you've ever used a debugger, whether it's GDB or Perl debugger or whatnot, you can set these breakpoints, these trace points, and then when you run the code, it will stop once it reaches that point in the code. And it'll return to you some sort of control over the program to look at the individual nature of the state of the variables at that point, which can be super useful. I mean, it's basically the equivalent of having more control when you put a bunch of print statements into your code to figure out what's the nature of the variables at these different times. So it's very useful. And then from PDB, there are these additional commands, list, next, step, and continue, which allow you to have some control. So again, let's do a really quick demonstration. Get out of this. So I just have a little script here. In the bottom screen here that is just a baby script to make a slice, like we did before. And I am going to add to it this import pdb, pdb.set_trace. Good question. A semicolon in Python is a way of essentially ending that line. So even though I have two separate commands here, Python sees them as two separate lines. No, I'm just doing it for brevity, really, to have them both on the same line. But this is the equivalent of doing this. Sorry. All right, so let's run this. We run it, and it gives us an error, which is great. And then it drops us to this PDB prompt. Why does it keep doing that? Man, it's so peculiar. Oh, all right. Thank you, Stephen. All right, so from here I can hit L, and it gives me a list of where I am in the source when it dropped out. And you can see that the source here is the same as this source down here. And that's the line that's about to be run. You see? The arrow associated with it. Where's the arrow? There's the arrow. It's the same place I put the set trace. And so I can run next, and it brings me to the next thing, the next line. And you can step through going deeper into the code. When there's a function call, it'll follow things into that function call. I'm not going to get into the details of PDB, but it's a very useful manner of investigating your code. And then you can hit continue to just continue. But of course, this one fails intentionally, I might add. I intentionally made this bad so that we could figure out what was going wrong with it. And so you can use the Python debugger to really figure out what's going wrong in your code. But maybe it's not something in your code. Maybe you're just misunderstanding what's going on, what YT is expecting of what you're doing. So for that, you can go to the YT documentation, which is right here. And there's a whole host of things. I mean, hopefully you've already checked this out before. There's all sorts of stuff that you can, this is the how to ask for help, which is essentially this talk in a HTML file. But there's all sorts of things here. But the most important thing, I think, is you can use this nice search that's on the right side of any of the documentation pages and type in, you know, let's say I'm having problems with load. I can't figure out what the heck load is supposed to do. So I go here and it returns, well, it returns every instance of load in the source that's been documented. So there's, you know, Ramsey's load and Orion load and Flash load and so on and so forth. But then it finds instances of that in the more narrative style of the documentation, which can be particularly useful. Of course, I chose a really bad thing to search for, but nonetheless. And while we're at it, you can also search the mailing lists for that same, I'm not going to search the mailing lists for load, but you can search the mailing lists for whatever keyword or function that you're having problems with to see if someone else has encountered a similar bug or whatnot to what you're encountering. Halo, all right. Oh. Like the Halo games. I guess so. All right. Yeah. So earlier this year, there were issues with doing projections of Halo profiles and so on and so forth. So you can get an idea of what's going on by searching these mailing lists and if somebody else has encountered any kind of bug that you may be encountering. All right. Finally, you can actually look at the source code, which we're all coders here. It's sometimes nice to just cut through the BS, cut through the documentation that was either done or was done poorly or something like that, and just get to the source code to actually figure it out for ourselves, what's going on. Now, there's this, everybody's probably familiar with grep for finding a keyword or a string in a larger text document, but there's, many of you may not know, there's this -r flag for grep, which allows you to search an entire subdirectory and hierarchy of subdirectories and the files within those for that word. So it's very, very useful. So for instance here, we're doing grep-r, so this recursive grep, looking for x, for the string x, where that would be a keyword associated with your problem or whatnot. And then we're searching the entire YT source directory to see where in YT the source is for whatever function you're trying to call or whatnot. Now I'm going to take a brief aside to talk about the YT source hierarchy. Okay, so everybody, there's a keyword, an environmental variable called YT destination that's defined by your shell. It was defined when you installed YT, and it probably points to something wherever you installed it, like home Stephen Scory / source / YT or YT i386 or YT x86, something like that. Within that directory sits the standard, you've got your source, your bin, your include, so on and so forth. Don't worry about these, just worry about the source directory. But even there, the YT doesn't sit directly inside that. Then there's the YT repository, which is YTHG, along with all the other packages that you had to install as part of this YT installation. So Python, because there's a Python packaged with it when you run the README, or when you run the installer, Python, HDF5, so on and so forth. Finally, we get to where YT actually sits. So it's like 3 levels deep in here. But that's where the source actually sits for YT and all of its bits associated with that. Okay. So we can use this grep-r. So let's look at Halo, for instance. That's a good one. Okay, so I'm just going to echo here, clear. Echo YT dest. Okay, it sits in user Hummels source YTI386. So I want to grep-r Halo. Okay, wow, there's a lot of Halo stuff. So you can see now it's brought up all of the files in the entire YT source that have mention of Halo. And there's a whole bunch of stuff. But, oh, I like this one. It's called haloobjects.py. That seems like a reasonable place to start. Oh. But where was that? Is that in analysis modules? Yes. Halo finding haloobjects.py. Okay. So we can go to oh, Halo finding. My mistake. And then inside this file, look for Halo. And there we get, oh, class Halo. Look at that. And now we can look at the source associated with this. Of course, it was easier to do that if we just ran IYT and hit the little question mark, but this allows us to get, to look at the entire source of this entire file. So it's really quite useful for finding all of the related functions and how the code is actually working. Any questions on that? Okay. All right, so let's say all of that, you look through the documentation and you're still coming up with the problem. You think that the YT code is just messed up. There's some bug in it, which may very well be true. We try and be careful, but there may be, problems. So the thing to do, and oftentimes I find this very useful in identifying and really distilling it in my mind, is identify what's going on with, what's the problem here, what's misbehaving, distill down a script to just the bare bones of what can reproduce that bug or that error that you're encountering, and then for whatever script you're doing and the errors associated with it, you can put them all online very easily in a public place by using this yt pastebin command or the paste flag or even this upload image thing. So let me just really quickly demonstrate those. So I'm just going to use this test.py Python script below. This is my I've distilled down the problem to this, but I'm still not sure what's going on. So I'm going to put it online by doing yt pastebin and then test.py, because that's the name of my script. So it thinks a little bit and it transmits, and it gives me back this little URL, which if you put into a web browser, now you can see this was the function that I was just looking at, and it brought it up in a very publicly accessible, although somewhat anonymous, location that then you can share that with the world. You can share it with your friends if your friends want to see your buggy code, or you can do whatever. But it's a very easy way of sharing code with other people. Furthermore, you can run python script.py -- paste, and essentially what that does is test.py, because that's mine. It tries to run your script, and then it spits the traceback, it spits the error messages into a web location. Oh, there it is. Okay. Just like it did for the source code. Oops. So there's the traceback associated with our problem. And finally, that's right. You have to know the hash. And that's why instead of this is the number of the source, whereas this is the number, this is the hash. So it's really anonymous. Okay. And finally, let's just say that you had an image that was output as part of this, and it helps for diagnosing what the problem is or what the error is. You can then, I just happen to have this from earlier from the flash data set of John's. I just happen to have this image, so I'm just going to use yt upload image test.png, and it thinks a bit and it spits it out and gives me a URL which takes me to a web location that has this image. So then again, you can share this URL with your friends, with your collaborators, with the people who you're trying to get to help you fix this bug. You can show them instead of having to worry about, oh, I'm going to email you the picture and the script. That's a pain in the butt. Just put it in a publicly accessible spot. Okay. So you've done all this. Oh yeah, and you can identify which version of the code you're using by running YT update or YT inst info. Yeah, that's also in the. We'll have that in the README for how to do all this on the documentation site. Yes, we'll cover that tomorrow too. So going through these steps oftentimes will help you to actually solve the problem on your own. But you'll be like, oh, of course, I forgot to do this or whatnot. It's very useful to go through this process. So finally, okay, so now you've done everything that you can do on your own. So now you want help from other people. So as many of you have already checked out, the nice IRC channel and the nice web interface for that IRC channel, you can get nice clients like Adium or IRSSI to run all the time on your computer, which can be fun. You know, it's fun to hang out in the IRC channel associated with YT. I do that all the time. Hey guys, how's it going? Yeah. But this is a nice fail-safe using the web-based system. So go on there and present to the people who are there, you know, me or Matt or Britton or Stephen or whomever. Present the problem that you're encountering, and if you've gone through the steps of kind of identifying what it is that's going wrong, if you can share a paste of the source code that's creating it, or even if you just have a question on how something is working, even if you haven't gone to all that trouble, if you have a question with how something's working, we're on there and you can get immediate feedback on what's going on. So try it out. Yeah. If you can't get a ready response on IRC, or you just don't like inter-relay chat, you can drop a line to the YT users email list, which most of you are probably on if you got invited to this particular conference or workshop. And again, try and use the details of what you use to create the problem from your efforts to distill it down to a small script. And finally, if all else has failed, you can submit a bug report. And bug reports are actually really easy to do. If you go to this website, which is the Bitbucket Mercurial page, you can, right here, you can submit it through there. In the upper right, I think there's an issues, and you can look at open issues to see if somebody else has already identified the bug that you're trying to create. Or you can create a new issue. Alternatively, there's a really nice command line thing. If you do YT bug report, it will allow you to submit a bug report through the command line, which actually I did earlier today, and it's super snazzy. So that's basically it. But the first and foremost thing is don't panic and don't give up, because it's not that hard to make progress on this, and all of us have been there, and all of us will continue to be there encountering problems in Python and YT and our own scripting inadequacies. So yeah, thanks. Any questions?